Am I the asshole for telling my husband the brutal truth about why I cheated instead of just apologizing? He asked me the one question I had been dreading for months. Why? I could have lied. I could have said it was a mistake, that I was sorry, that it meant nothing. But all the years of feeling invisible, of being treated like a piece of furniture in my own marriage, just boiled over. I looked him dead in the eye and told him a truth so savage it felt like I was carving it into his skin. He called me a monster. His family called me worse. And the man I cheated with? He was just a ghost, a means to an end. Now I'm sitting in the ruins of my life wondering if a kinder lie would have been better than a truth that burned everything to the ground. My husband, Mark, was what you'd call a good man. If you made a checklist for the perfect husband, he'd tick almost every box. Stable job as an architect? Check. Kind to animals and children? Check. Remembers my parents' birthdays and sends flowers? Check. He was handsome in a quiet, unassuming way, with kind eyes and a steady presence that had once made me feel like the safest woman in the world. We'd been married for 10 years, and for the first 5, things were great. We were a team. We built a life, bought a beautiful home with a garden, and talked about filling it with kids someday. On paper, we were the couple everyone wanted to be. But a story on paper isn't a life. A life is lived in the body, in the spaces between words, in the touches that are given and the ones that are withheld. And in that space, our marriage was a desert. The physical side of our relationship hadn't just dwindled. It had evaporated, leaving behind a dry, silent landscape of resentment that I navigated every single day. It started slowly, around year 6. A stressful project at his firm, he'd said. He was too tired. I understood. I'd rub his back, bring him tea, and go to bed alone, telling myself it was temporary. But temporary became the new normal. Weeks bled into months. My tentative initiations were met with a gentle but firm rejection. A hand on his thigh would be patted and removed. A kiss that tried to deepen would be softened and redirected to my forehead. A suggestion of an early night would be met with an excuse about an early morning. He was never cruel about it, never angry. It was always a soft, quiet shutdown that was somehow more painful than a loud argument would have been. It made me feel needy, vulgar for wanting my own husband. After the first year of this, I tried to talk to him. I remember sitting on the edge of our bed, the one we no longer shared in any meaningful way, my heart pounding with a mixture of hope and terror. I told him I missed him, that I missed us. I asked if something was wrong, if it was me, if he was sick, if he wasn't attracted to me anymore. He just shook his head, not meeting my eyes. "Don't be silly, Clara," he'd said, his voice gentle. "Of course I love you. I'm just stressed. Things at work are insane." He patted my hand, that goddamn placating pat, and said, "It'll get better, I promise." It didn't get better. It got worse. 2 years passed, then 3. 3 years without him touching me like a wife. 3 years of feeling like his sister, his roommate, his goddamn housekeeper who happened to share a mortgage with him. The silence on the subject grew louder than any noise. It became a third person in our marriage, a hulking, ugly presence that sat between us on the sofa, at the dinner table, and in the cold, empty space in our king-size bed. I started to feel like a ghost in my own life. I'd catch my reflection and wonder who that woman was. She looked tired. She looked hungry. Not for food, but for a touch that wasn't a polite pat on the arm. For a look that wasn't platonic. I began to feel a deep, corrosive bitterness take root. I loved him. Or at least, I loved the man he used to be and the life we were supposed to have. But the man he was now was a stranger who paid half the bills. I saw him looking at me sometimes, a flicker of guilt in his eyes before he'd look away. And I knew he wasn't oblivious. He was just a coward. He was choosing to let our marriage wither and die rather than have one difficult, honest conversation. He was happy with the companionship, the routine, the comfortable silence. He didn't need what I needed, and he was content to let me starve as long as his own needs were met. The desperation became a physical ache. It was a hollowness in my chest, a constant thrum of anxiety under my skin. I started going to the gym, not for my health, but to feel something, anything. The burn in my muscles, the sweat, the exhaustion. It was a physical sensation I could control, a feeling I could create for myself when the one I truly craved was denied me. And that's where I met Julian. Julian was a personal trainer at the gym. He was everything Mark wasn't. Where Mark was quiet, Julian was loud. Where Mark was reserved, Julian was overt. He was younger than me by a few years, with a body that was a testament to his profession and a smile that was pure, uncut trouble. He was cocky, flirty, and had an energy that was like a lit match in the dry tinder of my life. It started innocently. He corrected my form on the squat rack. His hands were firm on my waist, his voice low in my ear. "You've got to push from your heels, Clara. Feel the power in your legs." My skin burst into flames where he touched me. It was the most intentional, non-platonic touch I had received from a man in 3 years. My whole body went rigid. I'm sure he felt it. After that, he'd find reasons to talk to me. He'd ask about my day, tease me about my playlist, or bring me a water bottle. And he looked at me. God, the way he looked at me. It wasn't the soft, companionable gaze of Mark. It was a hungry look. A look that saw me not as a partner or a roommate, but as a woman. A body. And after years of feeling invisible, being seen as an object was intoxicating. It was a perverse kind of validation. I knew exactly what was happening. I wasn't an idiot. I was a 35-year-old woman in a sexless marriage, and a hot younger man was paying attention to me. It was the oldest cliche in the book. I told myself to stop, to be careful. I would go home to my beautiful house and my good husband, and feel a wave of guilt so profound it was nauseating. I was betraying him in my mind long before I ever did with my body. But the next day, I'd be back at the gym, and the magnetic pull was too strong. The buildup was a slow, agonizing torture. A casual brush of his hand against mine that lingered for a second too long. Leaning in close to whisper a joke, his breath warm on my neck. He knew what he was doing, and he knew that I knew. We were playing a game, and the rules were unspoken but crystal clear. One afternoon, he was stretching me out after a session. I was lying on the mat, and he was gently pulling my leg across my body. His face was close to mine, his expression serious as he concentrated. "You're really tight here," he murmured, his thumb pressing into my hip. The pressure was both painful and exquisitely pleasurable. I just looked at him, my breathing hitched. In that moment, the gym, the other people, the whole world just faded away. There was only the pressure of his thumb, the look in his eyes, and the question hanging between us. "My car's in the shop," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "Could you maybe give me a ride home?" I knew it was the precipice. I knew if I said yes, there was no going back. A part of my brain was screaming, "No, stop. This is a mistake. Think about Mark. Think about your life." But the rest of me, the part that had been starved and ignored for 3 years, was screaming louder. "Yes. Say yes. Feel something. Feel alive." "Okay," I heard myself say, my voice sounding distant and strange. The car ride was silent, but it was the loudest silence I've ever experienced. It was thick with anticipation. He didn't live far, just a small apartment complex a few miles away. When I pulled into the visitor parking, I kept the engine running. This was his stop. He could get out, say thank you, and it would be over. A line would have been approached but not crossed. He didn't move. He just sat there, looking at me. "Do you want to come up?" he asked. It wasn't a question. It was a confirmation. "I'm married," I said, the words feeling pathetic and hollow. A slow smile spread across his face. "I know," he said. "I'm not asking you to marry me, Clara. I'm just asking you to come upstairs." I turned off the car. His apartment was sparse and messy, smelling of old takeout and laundry detergent. It was a bachelor pad, a transient space. It was the opposite of my carefully curated home. And in that moment, I loved it for that. It was a place where my other life didn't exist. There were no wedding photos on the walls. No shared furniture bought on a happy Saturday afternoon. There was just a bed, a TV, and him. He didn't say anything. He just came to me, put his hands on my face, and kissed me. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was deep and hard and desperate. And I responded in kind. It was a kiss that wasn't about love or affection. It was about pure, unadulterated need. Years of pent-up frustration, loneliness, and desire came pouring out of me. I clung to him, my fingers digging into the muscles of his back, as if I was afraid he'd disappear. What happened next wasn't gentle or romantic. It was raw. It was animalistic. He stripped my gym clothes off me with an urgency that left me breathless. And when he touched me, really touched me, I started to cry. Not loud sobs, but silent, hot tears that tracked down my temples. They were tears of guilt, of shame, but also of a devastating, soul-shattering relief. My body, which had felt like a dead thing for so long, was suddenly, violently awake. Every nerve ending was on fire. He was just a body, and he was treating me like just a body. And it was exactly what I had been craving. To be wanted on the most basic, primal level. To be an object of pure physical desire, free from the complications of love and history and unspoken resentments. I didn't love Julian. I barely even liked him as a person. He was a means to an end. He was a fix. He was the drug I needed to numb the pain of my real life. The affair continued for 4 months. We'd meet once or twice a week, either at his apartment or in cheap motels on the other side of town. The sex was always furious, almost frantic. It was the only language we spoke. We never talked about our lives. He never asked about Mark, and I never asked about his other conquests, which I was sure existed. It was a perfect, sealed-off little world of sensation. The guilt was a constant companion. I'd leave him, shower until my skin was raw, and go home to my husband. I'd cook dinner. We'd talk about our days, and I'd feel like the most despicable human being on the planet. Mark would sometimes look at me, a question in his eyes, as if he sensed a shift in me but couldn't place it. I was more distant, but also weirdly calmer. The desperate edge was gone, replaced by a sullen, guilty quiet. I became careless. The arrogance of getting away with it for so long made me sloppy. One evening, I came home from a late session at the gym and jumped in the shower. I left my phone on the kitchen counter. I never did that. It was always in my purse or my pocket. A silent rule of the cheater. When I came downstairs in my robe, toweling my hair, Mark was standing in the kitchen. He was holding my phone. His face was ashen. He wasn't looking at me, but at the screen. He had never in 10 years looked at my phone. There was no need. We had trusted each other. Or rather, he had trusted me. "Who's Julian?" he asked, his voice flat. It was devoid of emotion, which was more terrifying than rage. My heart stopped. I didn't have to ask. I knew. A text message. Julian wasn't the brightest. He'd probably sent something crude, something undeniable. I couldn't speak. The lie I had rehearsed in my head 1,000 times. "He's just a guy from the gym. It's a joke," died on my lips. The truth was written all over my face. He looked up from the phone and his eyes finally met mine. And for the first time, I saw something other than quiet kindness. I saw a profound, shattering pain. He looked utterly broken. "Clara," he whispered, "what is this?" We stood there for what felt like an eternity. The hum of the refrigerator was the only sound. He didn't yell. He didn't throw the phone. He just waited. The quiet was his weapon, and it was gutting me. Finally, he sank into a kitchen chair, the phone clattering from his hand onto the table. He put his head in his hands. Why? He asked again, his voice muffled. Just, why? I thought we were happy. And that was it. That was the moment. The dam of 3 years of silence and loneliness and resentment just broke. All the quiet apologies I had planned, all the gentle lies I could have told to spare his feelings, they all vanished. All I felt was a sudden, white-hot rage. Happy? He was happy. He had his comfortable life, his predictable routine, his companion. He was getting everything he wanted from our marriage. What about me? I walked over and stood in front of him. He wouldn't look at me. You want to know why, Mark? I said, my voice dangerously low. Are you sure you want the real answer? He slowly lifted his head, his eyes red-rimmed and confused. He just nodded, a pathetic, wounded gesture. I cheated because you haven't laid a hand on me in 3 years, I said, the words coming out cold and sharp, like shards of glass. I cheated because I would lie in our bed night after night feeling like I was already dead, while you slept peacefully beside me. I tried to talk to you. I begged you to see a doctor, to talk to a therapist, to just talk to me, and you refused. You chose to let me wither away. He flinched as if I'd slapped him. Don't. I cut him off, my voice rising. Don't you dare say it's not true. I cheated because I couldn't remember what it felt like to be wanted by someone. I couldn't remember what it felt like to be touched by my own husband. You made me feel like my body was a burden. You made me feel disgusting for having needs that you decided were unimportant. I took a breath, the confession fueling itself now. So, yes, I found someone else. And it wasn't about love. Fuck, I don't even like him. It was about feeling something other than numb. I found a man who looked at me like I was a piece of meat. And it was a fucking relief, Mark. A relief. Because at least he saw me. At least he wanted something from me. He made me feel alive for 10 minutes at a time, which is more than you've done for me in years. You didn't just stop sleeping with me, Mark. You stopped seeing me. You turned me into a ghost, and I was desperate to feel solid again. So that's why. That's the fucking reason. Silence. He stared at me, his mouth slightly open. The confusion was gone, replaced by a look of utter horror. He wasn't just hurt by the affair anymore. He was annihilated by my reason. I had taken his passive neglect and held it up as the cause, refusing to let him be the simple victim. I had made him an accomplice to my betrayal. You're a monster, he whispered finally. To do that, and then to say that. To blame me. You're a cruel, cruel monster. He got up and walked out of the room. I heard him go upstairs, the sound of drawers opening and closing. An hour later, he came down with a suitcase. He didn't look at me as he walked to the front door. I'll have my lawyer contact you, he said, and then he was gone. That was 2 weeks ago. The fallout has been biblical. His parents have called me, screaming that I'm a heartless bitch who destroyed their perfect son. Our mutual friends have all taken his side, of course. To them, he is the good, kind man who was betrayed by his hypersexual, selfish wife. The narrative is simple. He is the victim. I am the villain. No one wants to hear about the 3 years of crushing loneliness. No one wants to hear about the neglect. That's complicated. That's messy. Cheater is a much easier label to apply. Julian texted me the day after Mark left. Everything good? I just replied, it's over, and blocked his number. He was a symptom of the disease, not the cause. He doesn't matter. So now I'm here, in this big, silent house that feels like a tomb. I've lost my husband, my friends, my life. And I know I was wrong to cheat. I know that's a line you don't cross. But the thing I keep replaying in my head is that final conversation. I could have just apologized. I could have cried and begged for forgiveness and taken all the blame. It might have made the separation less ugly. It might have preserved some shred of dignity for him. But I didn't. I chose to use the truth as a weapon. I wanted to hurt him with it because he had hurt me with his silence for so long. I wanted him to understand the depth of the wound he had inflicted on our marriage. And on me.
Thanks for watching. If you got this far, leave a comment, like if you liked it, and follow for more.